Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Inform to Reform podcast. I'm so incredibly honored and excited to be in Washington, D.C. today with one of our United States Senators, Cathrine Cortez Masto, who is a representative from my home state and her home state, Nevada. And so we're so excited to be able to ask her a few questions today, but I'm going to let her introduce herself briefly.
Well, thank you. I am excited to talk with you, Karina. So I'm the U.S. Senator, one of two from the great state of Nevada, and born and raised there. I'm third generation and love everything about getting the opportunity to represent the great state. It's a wonderful place to live. Yes. And grow a business and thrive.
I'm a sixth generation Nevadan, actually, and born and raised in Carson City, so a bit up north from where you are from. Right. Will you tell everybody a bit about growing up in Las Vegas and how that was?
I will. Oh my gosh, my parents, both their families came to Southern Nevada, my gosh, in the 40s and 50s. So at that time, there's probably 40,000 people living there. Now we have almost 2 million.
Yes.
And it was an opportunity for a better life. They worked in the casinos, or they worked directly from a business that worked for the casinos and the tourism industry. And for them, it was a great opportunity to have a good paying job and put a roof over your head and care for your kids. And so my father grew up there from the age of 5 in Southern Nevada. And my mother and her family, they came out there. My mother was probably about 16. So they both graduated Las Vegas High School, which was one of only few that were there. But I don't think they dated then. They dated after graduation. And just have an incredible life there. I have a sister, and we both grew up in Southern Nevada, went to the public school systems there, and as I was telling you earlier, we both graduated from UNR, Go Wolfpack.
Yes, we are both Wolfpack grads, actually.
That's right.
Yes.
So it's just, and for me, I love everything about Nevada. I've had the opportunity now to live in both ends of the state, right?
Yes.
Whether going to school there or working as Attorney General or working for a governor, I've lived in the north, I've lived in the south, and I travel throughout Nevada as much as I possibly can because it's just so beautiful.
It truly is, and I mean, we have such a big geographical range in Nevada, from like Tahoe, only about 30 minutes away from Carson City, and then down in the desert in Vegas, and it's very different, but it's beautiful everywhere.
It is. I just was home in August, and I was up near in Ely. We went to Great Basin National Park because they have an astronomy program there at that national park. Yes, and it's a dark sky, so we went out there
that's amazing.
To participate. That's what I mean. There's so much
there is so much
to offer. Yeah.
And I've so often found that people really, when they hear Nevada and don't know too much about it, they immediately think only Vegas.
That's
but
right.
there is so much more to it. And
Absolutely.
Being Miss Nevada, I've been able to really represent the full state, which has been an incredible opportunity.
And thank you. I can't think of a better person to represent our state.
I appreciate that so much.
I appreciate it because it's a lot of work
getting
around.
Is.
It's for a year, is it right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of work to do, and this is part of it. So I thank you for educating so many about our system of government and what's going on.
Well, thank you. Well, to start us off, I wanted to ask you, what originally made you want to get into the political field, to run for office, and to represent Nevada?
A couple of things. I grew up with a father and mother who were always engaged in the community and giving back. My mother, very active in local sororities in our communities, giving back. My father, he actually started off, he and my mother, when they were just married, as a parking attendant in one of the hotels and casinos down there. Was the Dunes Hotel. And then he moved on to other jobs, but then he decided to run for office to help solve problems, right, in the community. And he ran for county commission and won. And so he was a county commissioner in Southern Nevada for about 16 years. And that was during the time my sister and I were growing up. And whether you realize it or not, it has an impact on your daily life when you see your parents working toward greater good in the community, engage in public service and what that actually means. It's good government, but also helping solve problems for your neighbors and your community members. So unbeknownst to me, that's kind of really, I grew up with it, so it's natural for me to kind of work in that space. And it wasn't until, but I never wanted to run for office. I never thought about it. Even when I graduated from UNR, I went to law school at Gonzaga in Spokane, Washington, came back to practice. And it wasn't until I was working in local government that there was an opportunity to run for the Attorney General's seat in Nevada. And I thought, I could do that. and there's issues I want to address. I want to work on, we were having a methamphetamine problem. I want to address it. I want to look at how we solve problems for juvenile justice and address domestic violence and work towards prevention. So I thought, oh my gosh, this would be an opportunity for me to tackle those and actually work on behalf of people of Nevada. So I ran for office and didn't know what I was doing and just jumped in and said, I got to go talk to everybody, tried to get around the state and talk to anybody who would meet with me. And I won. And I served 2 years, or 2 terms. So each term is 4 years as Attorney General. And then your term limited. So I served 8 years as the Attorney General of the state of Nevada.
And then after that, is that when you transitioned into running for United States Senate?
And then I decided to run for U.S. Senate because there was still work that I wanted to do at a federal level. And I will tell you, it's based on my work as Attorney General. Most people don't know the state of Nevada, over 80% of the land is owned by the federal government. So that means we have to bring in our federal partners from the Department of Interior and the BLM and the Park Service and the Forest Service. We have to work with them to not only help manage the land, but for economic development, for affordable housing, for so many things that we need in our communities.
Yes.
And I thought, what better way to kind of push down on them to really pay attention to Nevada than working at the federal level as a U.S. Senator and talking to them about the issues that are important for Nevada.
Yes. Well, that makes so much sense on why you did transition into that sphere because, yes, again, for those of you who don't know, about 80% of our land is federally owned. And so Nevada, we have our big urban centers, Reno and Vegas, and the rest of it is pretty rural or federally owned land. And so it's a very unique and special state in that sense. And so I wanted to also ask you a little bit about being the first woman elected to the United States Senate from Nevada and the first Latina elected to the United States Senate. How do you work to represent those communities?
I think first of all is making sure they recognize they have representation now. So remember, I did not get to the U.S. Senate until the year 2017, and I was the first female representing the state of Nevada as U.S. Senator, and I was the first Latina. That's 2017. That's crazy.
That's not that long ago.
Yeah.
No.
And right now there's only 25 women in the U.S. Senate out of 100. So we need more representation, and to me that's why it is important for us to be at the table when policy is being made, to represent all of our constituencies. I truly believe that the people that work in government should actually look like the people we represent, right? Because you don't want anybody left behind when policy is being made or decisions are being made and we're trying to solve problems on behalf of everyone. And that's why, for me, getting around our state and talking to everyone, letting them know kind of the committees that I'm on and what I'm working on, and that we need to solve problems together, and what can I do at a federal level to address the challenges they're facing. And then most importantly, then bring those ideas back and turn it into legislation or getting resources to get done, and then going back to the state and said, here's what we've done together, now we have to implement it, and now there's still work to be done, right? So you can't just do the one-off and say, oh, I'm running, ask for your votes, and never talk to people ever again.
Exactly.
Because good government is representing people all the time. And I don't think most people realize in a U.S. Senate office, the primary responsibility for a U.S. Senate office, if they do it right, is constituent services. That's the number one thing I do in my office. It is because I represent the constituents of Nevada, so they should feel free to call me or email me or talk to me about issues that they are being impacted by at a federal level where I can have a role to try to solve those problems.
Well, so going back to the role that women in leadership play, in the federal level, we talked about how only 25 U.S. senators are women. But in Nevada, if you didn't know, we are the first and the only state with a female majority legislature in our Nevada legislature. And so do you work with them in any capacity, and what sort of does that dual federalism look like for you as a United States Senator?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I do think people forget our system of government is made up of that duality. The federal side has to work with the state side. What happens in state government, from the governor's office and our constitutional office down to our state legislators, they pass and work on solving problems at a state level, a local level. I do it at a federal level, but they should mirror one another or be compatible, right? There's certain things that are federal rights, there's certain things that are states' rights. And certain priorities the states have, and certain priorities and jurisdictions we do at a federal level. but they should always be compatible and work together. So it is important for me to talk with our leaders, our elected leaders, whether it's in the governor's office or in the state house or even in local government, our local county commissioners, right, or our local city council members and our mayors. They have a lot of impact. They have a big impact, actually, on our constituents in Nevada. And so it's important for us always to be communicating and sharing information and talking to one another. I do it all the time, whether I'm in Nevada or a lot of the times they will fly out here to D.C. And meet with me here, both the mayors, the county commissioners, the legislators. And I always try to make an opportunity to either talk with the governor when I'm at home or over the phone or texting, whatever it is that an issue that has come up that I think he needs to be aware of. And he does the same thing.
That's great. Especially because we do have a Republican governor, so being able to work together, I think, is something that a lot of people have questioned in federal politics lately on the divisiveness. And so being able to see that two different parties can work together so well for the benefit of their constituents and the state of Nevada is incredible to see.
That's right.
And so transitioning a bit into how much time do you spend in D.C. versus how much time you spend in Nevada?
Oh, well, primarily the job is in D.C., right? So we are in session, and when we are in session, that's usually a Monday through Thursday or Friday, most often Thursday, and Thursday night. And then that's when we have our meetings, we have the votes on the floor, and then we have our committee hearings. I'm on 4 committees. I'm on Banking and Housing and Urban Affairs Committee. I sit on the Senate Finance Committee. I'm on Senate Energy and Natural Resources for the reasons that we just talked about the land in Nevada. And then I sit on Senate Indian Affairs. And so those keep me busy really trying to address the issues that are unique to Nevada that have an impact on Nevada. And the entire delegation does the same, right? So our entire delegation, we work well together because we all are on different committees or different areas where we're trying to pass legislation or get resources that come into the state of Nevada. And so you will see us working, both chambers, working together. We'll get a piece of legislation that's bipartisan on the Senate side, and then we'll find a House colleague, try to get some bipartisan support on the House side or vice versa to get it passed out of both chambers and then over to the President for signature.
So what do those committee meetings look like, and how do they differ from a Senate floor vote? And then what primarily happens on the floor? I think there's a bit of a confusion between how much time is spent in committee versus how much time is spent on the Senate floor. So what are those differences?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So in the committees, the intent of the committees is where the policy is made. So legislation is drafted, and then the committee members will have hearings about issues, draft policy legislation on those policy issues that we're trying to solve, hopefully in a bipartisan way. And then we mark it up, meaning we bring it to committee, we have amendments or we talk about it, and we then have votes to get it out of committee. To move a piece of legislation, you got to move it through the committee. And that's the goal here is that everybody weighs in from all the different states that are represented in that committee, right? And R's and D's and independents are involved, and the goal is to get a piece of legislation that has no unintended consequences. They're not unfunded mandates. It's actually solving a problem. Once you get it out of committee, then the next step is to get it to the floor of the Senate for a vote, because then you need all of the senators to be able to have a chance to vote on it. And in the Senate, depending on the type of legislation, it usually needs 60 votes, right? And so 60 votes to pass it. And then the same thing it'll go over to the House side, and we'll have to pass it over there. And then when it's passed on the House side and it's passed both chambers, then it's on its way to the President's desk for signature.
So that's really interesting to note the differences between what happens in the committee versus the floor, because I think a majority of the time people think all of the work is done on that floor session, and it's a small percentage of the work that's done in committee, and so it's interesting to note those differences. So I wanted to transfer a little bit into the policy that you have worked on in accordance with sex trafficking issues in Nevada, specifically in Las Vegas. And so what did that policy look like? How does it impact Nevadans today? And then specifically, does it have more impact in Las Vegas than our other Nevada areas?
Yeah, it's a great question again, and I'll tell you why. Because most people, don't realize that we have actually a sex trafficking problem, not just in Nevada, but across the country. But when they learn about it, then they're engaged, let's do something about it. And that was the case in Nevada. When I was Attorney General, gosh, it had been back in 2010, excuse me, we were starting to hear sex trafficking. And what I mean by that is the sexual exploitation of minors and young adults. And I saw a little bit of it when I was working for the county, because I work with juvenile justice, and some of our kids were getting arrested for prostitution. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And now, fast forward as Attorney General, I'm learning more about what that looks like, in the sense of they're not just out there intentionally trying to sell their bodies, or there's somebody that's actually behind the scene exploiting them, like a pimp, or in some cases, guardians or some of their own family members. And so once I did the ride-along with Metro in Southern Nevada, because they have a unit that was focused on this very issue when I was Attorney General, I realized this is something that's happening in my state, right, where I live and grew up. And once you're open to it, then you see it happening. So that was it. I had to do something about it. Got with a number of stakeholders throughout the state and started working on drafting legislation to create the crime of sex trafficking, to make sure that we were holding those pimps and perpetrators accountable, and then also bringing additional resources to the victims to put them on on a pathway to becoming survivors. I drafted it, got to introduce it into our state house. Same thing, we introduced the legislation. This time, because it was such an important issue, both committees in the Assembly and the Senate, instead of meeting separately, they met together to hear. It was incredible to hear the testimony on this bill. And it was heartbreaking. I don't think there was a dry eye. There were people that came forward that were victims that nobody even knew, and they'd been living in the community forever. But it was a perfect example of the state, I don't care whether you're D or an R, what party, of people coming together to solve this problem. And we passed it out of that committee, that joint committee. And then it went to the governor's office for signature, and we passed that law. And I have met some incredible women who are now survivors, who were the first to be a part of a prosecution that was holding a pimp accountable based on their exploitation of these individuals as victims. And they are now the biggest advocates of still providing these services. There's more work that needs to be done, I will tell you, because every time, and this is true not just for Nevada but across the country, every time there's a big sporting event, right? It could be the Super Bowl or something happening, that you will see the numbers of exploitation, sexual exploitation of individuals, it increases. And they are being sold online, and they are being sold in person in different venues. And so there's still a lot of work in this space to be done. And so I've carried that with me. I will tell you, in Senate Indian Affairs, one of the things I learned there were so many of our young girls and women in our indigenous communities, in our tribal communities, that were disappearing, or they were being murdered, and they were being exploited sexually. And so it was, nobody really was capturing the data. Nobody was going after it, focused in enforcement. So again, I got with one of my Republican colleagues, and we actually introduced and passed two pieces of crucial legislation. One was Savannah's Act, and the other was Not Invisible, so that we can get our federal partners and the federal resources who have oversight and jurisdiction of these tribal communities to start capturing the data and then start enforcing the law to hold these perpetrators accountable. So there's constantly work being done, but there's more that we need to do for services for victims. That's why VAWA, which is the Victim Crimes Act for Women, is so important, and the federal role is making sure we're funding it. There's so much that needs to be done still to help women and girls and young boys that are exploited. But the first step, and I thank you for this, is the education, because most people don't even know what's happening. So that's the first step in prevention.
And I think that's so important to recognize, is that the education is the first step. And I think that's the case for so many issues in our nation. Even when we go down to a lack of youth voters, it particularly takes place because there's a lack of education surrounding the political system and the way that we elect our officials. And so moving into this final stretch of this election cycle, I wanted to ask if you have any encouragement or Any words of advice for young voters who are trying to navigate this political election cycle?
I do, because I hear it from my nieces and nephews as well. Where do I go? There's so much noise. There's so much information out there. And what I tell them is, one, your vote matters, so don't get discouraged. Don't just say, there's too much and I'm not going to vote, because every vote matters. Think about it in Nevada. Our races are so close.
So close.
I mean, I won my re-election to the U.S. Senate by 7,928 votes in Nevada. Every vote mattered. And we see that in Nevada, the close races, so you can make a difference. But to get educated about the candidates, I would say a couple of things. One, Nevada's still small enough where you can actually go meet those candidates, right? Go to events where they are and ask them questions. That's important. And then do your own research. Hear what they're saying in public venues or how it's being reported. And make sure that you're educated about the issues that you care about and whether these folks that are running for office are going to actually solve those problems or have ideas about solving those problems. I think that is just as important as well. But my one ask is that you just don't get discouraged and vote. Please just get out and vote.
Voting is so important, especially when we're going down the ballot. This general election, we have the presidential election, obviously, but in Nevada, we have state and assembly representatives up for election. We have local offices up for election, even down to the school board. And so making sure your voice is heard across the ballot, not just at that presidential level, is so important.
It is. Thank you. And because I also think people don't realize the elected officials at all levels of government have a direct impact on our lives.
Yes.
Right? The policies they're making or how their votes and what they're doing are going to impact us or our family members, and that's the real purpose of why we have the right to vote.
Yes.
And why it's protected constitutionally to give us the opportunity to weigh in on what our communities should look like by electing individuals who are going to represent our interests.
Exactly. And here in Nevada, your vote really does count. As a swing state, the presidential election could come down to our state, and it very much did in 2020. And so being able to make such a big impact on that federal level, Nevadans, it's truly up to you to determine how this election pans out. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I couldn't be more appreciative. And everybody, thank you for joining us again for the Inform to Reform podcast, and I'll see you on the next one.